Yeah, we went through that.
Hmm.
Is Yehuda joining us or no?
No.
No,
Not anymore, or just this week?
Scheduling conflict.
Unknown.
It might be every week, so he has to change the schedule.
Okay.
Welcome to Garden of the Spirit, a class studying apples from the orchard. This for the second time around. This class meets in Long Meadow, Massachusetts, and is held in memory of Malka Ruth Bas Moshe, Margaret Vogel of blessed memory. Apples from the Orchard contains selections of teachings of Kabbalah from the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, based on the weekly Torah portion, superbly translated and explained by Rabbi Moshe Wisniewski. Okay, so last week we mentioned we talked about the fourth klipa. There are three klipas that are that are absolute evil, or absolute it calls atmeos legamri. They're all fully contaminated. They're tamei. I guess in some places we'll see the reference of ra, bad, but in many places talk about klipa. It's a shell, the shell of the pulp and of the fruit or the peel. And then there is a klipa snoga, a klipa that has a glow in it, which means that it has good in it. The idea is that it can be, when it's used for bad, it's bad. When it's used for good, it is good. The neutral things that we have in our lives are connected with klipas noga. They are a klipa that has a glow. So in general, I'm not comfortable using the translation of evil for klipa, and I'd prefer just to call it klipa, because maybe one day I'll find a more accurate term to describe what klipa is. So we talked about Onkelos, the convert, and who translated the Torah into, he was one of the people who translated Torah into Aramaic. At first, actually, the rabbis rejected. They weren't happy with it, satisfied, and he revised it. And today is printed in almost every edition of the Chumash. And this is also the idea of the Aramaic, taking a language other than Hebrew and using it for holy purposes. So this is what we also talked about, that that Adam caused great damage to souls when he ate from the tree of knowledge, and how Cain and Hevel both caused things to get worse. So far we actually, this is a parsha of Noach. So far I don't think we've mentioned Noach. Maybe we asked a few questions. So we're on page 25. And let me share my screen. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to move on to, we're going to also talk about how this relates to intimacy. Now, we do talk a lot about intimacy we come across it many times in this class. Why is that? This is all about, Kabbalah is all about describing the creation. That's it. How the world gets created. Not only once, but on a continuous basis. Another way to say creation is to say the relationship between Hashem and the world. So Kabbalah describes the relationship between Hashem and the world, because that's what creation is. It's the relationship between Hashem and the world. Part of the process, a lot of what we're focused on is about the joining, blending, union, engaging in gamegenesis of a male aspect and a female aspect. And through their joining or coupling, as they call it here, it causes the divine energy, divine light, they had another word for it.
Ein
The-
Sof, I don't know.
Huh?
Ein Sof, I don't know.
Yeah, but the English here has a word that magnificence, not magnificence, the
Beneficence.
beneficence, the divine beneficence, thank you, to flow into the world. Okay, that's needed, right? You're running your lawnmower, or worse, you're running your snowblower, and suddenly it runs out of gas. Okay, it's gonna cut out. If we run out of, if the divine flow gets cut off, the world ceases to exist. So you need that, just like you need the gas to keep flowing, to keep your snowblower running. You need the divine, you need the divine beneficence to continue to flow. And this happens through Zer primarily. I mean, obviously there's a long thing, but we're focused on the union of Ze'er Anpin with Nukva. And so so when those two blend, that's how the divine energy comes down. So that's why we talk about, that's why we speak about this quite often. It gives us insight into how the process works. Mibsari echazeh eloka. From my flesh, I perceive godliness. By looking at our own body, by looking at how things work in the world, since it's a product of creation, we can understand how creation happens, how creation works. So, intimacy is one of those things that can be perhaps related to Noga. That can be the greatest holiness because it reflects, because it's a reflection of how the divine beneficence flows. So it could be the greatest holiness. It can also go the other way. It can also go for klipa when it's not done properly. I think we talked about that. I think we did talk about that last week. Yeah, we talked about that last week. There are laws. Obviously, there's the obvious things like an intimacy that occurs between husband and wife. You notice how we speak about in the passive voice. It occurs between husband and wife, not an active. When husband and wife engage in intimacy, that's using the active voice, in a loving, caring, mutual manner, that's with great holiness, where those are the obvious things, where one is upset, or are there other situations not good, and then there are the laws that are involved. That has to be between husband and wife, obviously, not between people who aren't married or people who are married, but to other people, and things like that. And then there are other rules that we have that needs to happen in the dark. They're called the rules of tznius, rules of modesty. They're not the hard laws of of clear mitzvahs in Torah, but it's laws of modesty that we follow. So intimacy can go with great holiness. It can also fall into klipa. So one of those things about like tznius or recommendations is that our rabbis, and I guess probably some of these are that during intimacy, the husband and wife need to be thinking only about each other, not about other people. So one of the things it says is our rabbi spoke favorably of intimacy that takes place after midnight. I don't think that practically nowadays that this applies, but it is mentioned in the books that ideally intimacy should take place after midnight. That means when there aren't people walking around, when the street is quiet, so they're not distracted by other voices. But there is a Kabbalistic aspect too, and this I've actually just read about the last month or two. The day and night are both divided into two. One half of the day is associated, and night are associated with chesed, and half of the day and night are associated with gvura. There are 12 hours in each one. The 6 hours of half a day, I think, correspond to the 6 spheras of Zeir Anpin. So and the Vav of Hashem's name. The first half of the day and the second half of the night are times of chesed, benevolence, because it's getting brighter. That means that from midnight until midday, it's counted as chesed, where the sun is coming up, the sun is rising. The second half of from midday until midnight, that is the second half of the day, and the first half of the night are times of gvura, because it's getting darker. Sun is setting, and the sun has set, and we're going towards midnight. Since, if you think about it as a circle, then the midday, sun starts its descent, passes the horizon, and then continues on down. So it's still going down until it reaches midnight at the bottom of the circle. Since intimacy should take place at night, after midnight is preferable, since it is a time of chesed. This is a Kabbalistic reason. As I mentioned in the books, they talk about a more practical reason, because then people aren't out in the street. You're not distracted by other voices. You don't think about someone else. And again, that I don't think this is something that we're careful to follow nowadays. So we're gonna speak about that now. Okay, 25. Now, Alan, are you up to reading?
Yes,
Okay, 25, the last bold line.
yes. The Noga principle encloses the light of holiness after midnight. The realm of the fruit or kernel of holiness is envisioned as existing within the 4 shells. In this depiction, we may consider the Noga shell as protecting the holiness from the evil shells. This is true, of course, to the extent that the individual or society has endeavored to consecrate the Noga shell by subsuming their mundane activities into the realm of holiness. Otherwise, the Noga shell comes under the rule of evil, and there is no protective layer separating evil from holiness. Since this protection is said to be operative specifically after midnight, we are taught that marital relations are preferably conducted at this time of the night. The couple are thus assured that their union will be unhampered by the attacks of evil or confusing thoughts.
Okay, please read footnote 8.
It could be that the proper translation of chazos here is midday, and it refers to the fact that some consider it preferable to read the Torah portion after midday on Friday. But the context of the rest of the passage seems to indicate that midnight is intended.
Yeah, so over there we're talking midnight, after midday or midnight. That was specifically talking about it was following about Shnai Mikra V'Chatargum, the practice to read through the Torah portion twice the pasuk in Hebrew and then once with the Aramaic, once reading the Aramaic translation, and that is connected. It says that best to do Friday afternoon. But here is also connecting it with Adam and giving nourishment to the forces of evil. So let me go on a little bit. Hold on. 14. By his sin, Adam allowed Klippa to capture the light of Noga. So that Noga means to glow or light, and it is a klipa that does have light, and therefore it can go either way. It can go to the side of klipa, it can go to the side of holiness. So Adam allowed a breach in the protective covering, and the klipa captured the light of Noga. Next, we're going to talk about Hanoch. Hanoch is seventh in line from Adam, counting Adam. If you count Adam, he's number 7, and he's the great grandfather of Noach, who was 10th from Adam. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says there were 10 generations from Adam until Noach. Hanoch was a great tzaddik, and the Torah says Hashem took him before his time, and apparently the explanation is before he could be led astray. When his time on earth was up, Hashem set him up to be an angel who is overseer of this world. We are forbidden from mentioning the names of angels unless they are also names of people. So in this class, we have taken to calling this angel Tron. The Medrash says that Hanoch was a cobbler. Actually, Medrash Talpiot, that Hanoch was a cobbler. The Hebrew word for shoe is the same as tolak. Shoe is min-al. Shoe is na'al, nun ayin lamed, and lak is min-al, mem nun ayin lamed, or tolak. What is the connection? Do they both have the same name, same word? But in any case, when it says he was a cobbler, it means that he locked the breach created by Adam. And then so Hanoch protected divine light of Bria from being sucked away by Klippa, or from giving nourishment to the Klippa. Okay, so we are on 26 at the top. Alan, continue.
The sin of Adam was that he caused this protective covering to be breached, and at that opening, the forces of evil benefited from the light of holiness. Adam's sin punctured the Noga shell, allowing the forces of evil to invade like a worm enters a fruit and suck from holiness. This is the mystical significance of the statement our sages that Enoch was a cobbler, meaning that he closed that which Adam opened up and was able to cover the light of Bria.
One moment. In Hebrew, the translation, he writes the word cobbler. In Hebrew, it says he sewed shoes. which is the same thing.
Mhm.
But it specifically says he sewed shoes, shoes meaning being the same word as to close up. Okay, continue, Alan.
Right. Hanoch, the sixth generation from Adam, was something of a saint or ascetic who renounced the evil ways of his rapidly degenerating society. In the Midrash, it is stated that the phase describing the end of his life on earth, and he was no more, for Hashem took him, instead of the more usual, and he died, implies that Hashem made him into an angel, specifically the angel Tron. Tron occupies a pivotal position in the hierarchy of angels and serves, among other things, to protect the realms of holiness from the forces of evil. The word, go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say I don't remember the explanation, but when you say at the end of the benching, Nar Haisi Gamzakanti, I was young and I grew old. Below Raisi Sadik Neza, but I haven't seen a Sadik who's been abandoned. So Nar they say refers to Hanoch. But I don't remember the explanation on that. Okay, continue, Alan.
The word for shoe in Hebrew, Naal or Minal, is derived from the root meaning to close or to lock. The foot is the interface between man and the earth, or allegorically between holiness and mundane non-holiness. In order that man not be injured by the stones and thorns on the earth, he wears shoes to protect his feet. Thus, Hanoch, both in his early life and his celestial life as Tron, is involved in rectifying Adam's sin by protecting man from the injuries and dangers of evil. He was able to protect the light of the world of Bria from exposure to evil, but not any of the lower levels.
Okay, so Bria now, Hanoch was able to make sure that no divine light leaves Bria for nourishment to Klipa. In the term that's commonly used, we call it Yanikas Hachitzonim. Yanika means to suck or to nourish, and Chitzonim are external forces. Chitzonim means outside, so it'd be external forces. Okay, so Bria now is safe. How about the third stage of creation, Yetzira, or the fourth stage, Asiya? Here we go. 16. The third stage of creation, Yetzira, however, was not protected in this way. When Yitzchak and Rivka were in the land of Plishtim, Yitzchak was afraid he would be killed over her. So they told people that she was his sister, much as Avram did in Egypt and when he went to the Plishtim 2 times. The Torah says, King Avimelech, king of the Plishtim, gazed through the window and saw Yitzchak fooling around with Rivka. The word in the Torah is mitzachek. Mitzachek means to make laughter. In one translation I saw, it says that Yitzchak was jesting with Rivka. I choose the term fooling around. And the Rashi and the Medrash, says that they were engaged in gamogenesis. And Avimelech gazed through the window and realized that they're not brother and sister. And they were too close. And then he called Yitzchak and said, why did you tell me? The issue here is, I wrote that. Rashi explains they're engaged in intimacy. At that point, Avimelech realized they're husband and wife. What was going for the obvious question is, why was this taking place during the day when they could be seen? And You ordinarily, people are not allowed to be, we don't do this during the day unless there's some kind of extenuating circumstance. So I just happened to learn about an hour ago that I do this every day with my daughter. So right now we're up to this place. One moment. One thing he says that the Medrash says that as time goes on, people get careless and they think the danger's past. So, and that's why Yitzchak and Rivka let down their guard. So it says here that that Yitzchak, when he was mourning for his father, he separated from his wife. But then as time passed, the grief over his father's death receded and mourning was lessened. But then they also write what his fault was, that his separation was not so much out of mourning, but more out of to maintain the appearance that he and Rivka were actually brother and sister. So this is considered a fault or a misdeed because they should have been in grief over his father's passing, over Avram's passing. But it was actually that wasn't the real reason. It was because of to dispel suspicion that they were actually married. Then it says that Yirmiyah said, "Cursed be the day on which I was born." This is referring to the day of his death. "May the day on which my mother bore me be not blessed." This is referring to the day of his conception. The Medrash questions, is it possible that his father, the righteous Hilkiah, would violate the prohibition mentioned above and engage in relations during the day? Then the Medrash answers, since Jezebel, the wicked wife of King Achav, was massacring the prophets, Hilkiah was on the run, and the only time that he could visit his wife was by day, and then he would check out quickly. So the point is, as I mentioned, if there are extenuating circumstances and there are special circumstances, then it is permissible by day. In any case, exactly what was going on here between Yitzchak and Rivka, why it was taking place during the day, is not clear. But 17, anytime we speak of faults in our holy forefathers, it is meant in the most subtle form and not to be taken literally as we think of it in our terms. It's very, very important to remember, and it could mean that there is a fault or vulnerability, but we have to understand, usually it is a very extremely subtle form of whatever it is. So here we say, Yitzchak's actions at that time were at the level of Asiya, the fourth stage of creation. Intimacy, or what Avimelech observed was only the Asiya aspect of what they were doing and not the holiness involved. Intimacy is a reflection of the flow of divine light through creation, as I mentioned to introduce the class. However, at the stage of Asiya, it is purely for physical pleasure and does not reflect spiritual process. This puts a lot of pressure on us, boys.
Yeah.
This is similar, and so it also makes the comparison, the Arizal makes the comparison to intimacy between women, where although two partners are involved, both experience the pleasure of intimacy, but there is obviously no transmission of seed, which would reflect the spiritual flow of divine light. So it's there, but there's no divine flow. I mean, obviously there's or there's nothing that reflects the spiritual flow of divine light. And therefore, in the sense of the flow of divine energy, it is an empty act. And so he compares this to what Avimelech observed between Yitzchak and Rivka. Again, if it means that Yitzchak and Rivka dropped at that time that their action was corresponded to the level of Asiya, then it is meant in the most subtle form. It's for Yitzchak. This was a not living up to what he could have, or it could mean just. It may mean that. 1 second. That Yitzchak and Rivka were engaged on a spiritual level, a high spiritual level. But what Avimelech observed was the most physical part of it, or the part of their act that corresponds to Asiya, the fourth stage of creation. Okay? Jim, are you ready?
Yeah.
26, but about the world.
But about the world of Yetzirah, it says, and Abimelech looked in through the window. When he was staying in the land of the Philistines, Yitzhak told the ruler, Abimelech, that Rebekah was his sister, for he feared that if he told him the truth, that Rebekah was his wife, Abimelech would kill him in order to take her. But we are told, Abimelech looked into their tent through the window, saw them engaging in marital intercourse, and thus discovered they were husband and wife. Abimelech signifies the evil of the Philistines. The fact that he was able to observe the union between Isaac and Rebekah means that their level of intercourse was in some way exposed or vulnerable to the intrusion of evil. Isaac engaged in marital relations on the level of Asiya, where there is not intended to be such intercourse, for that is the level of lesbianism. This is why the snake envied them, for he is on the level of Asiya. Isaac here was evidently engaging in marital relations in a relatively physical way, after the manner of the Philistines, were known for their excessive sexual indulgence. This is why the king of the Philistines was able to intrude on their union. He was there anyway, so to speak. Marital relations are intended to be a sublime intertwining of the physical and the spiritual aspects of the couple's union, not, a mere exercise in physical gratification. When there is no sublime spiritual union between male and female, with all this implies in terms of union of the male and the female principles in creation, the sexual act is reduced to the pursuit of raw sensual pleasure. In this way, it is like homosexuality, where sensual pleasure is paramount and considered the justification for the intercourse and the indication of its rightness. The spiritual union between partners, if there is any, is subordinate to the physical and is in contrast to the reverse situation in proper marital relations. Once intercourse occurs on this level, the snake, like Abimelech, who was simply playing the role of the snake further along in history, can rightfully argue that he is as fit a consort for Eve as Adam.
One moment. Oh, once? Oh, in other words, if it's anyway, the last line means if it's anyways, happening at only a base level, and there's no spiritual part to it. So what do you need Adam for? You can put the snake there. You can put Avimelech there.
Right.
Okay, and my sentence I think adds a little bit that I forgot to read. This is also similar to the snake desiring Chava, where any flow would belong to Klipa rather than holiness.
I think it's the same snake.
Right, same snake, yeah.
Yes. Same snake as what?
As with Chava. It's the
Yes.
same snake.
Yeah, that's what he says. He says here,
Yeah.
Avimelech is playing the part of the snake.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay, so the Zohar, so we're comparing what happened in the Garden of Eden of what's going on with Adam and this and the where he loses holiness to Klipa, as to Avimelech viewing or voyeuring the what's taking place in Yitzchak and Rivka. You know, we haven't mentioned the word interception in a long time. So that's it. A poorly planned play, and the ball was very easily intercepted. Okay, 18. The Zohar says Adam actually was involved in 3 major misdeeds. Murder, referring to the seed he inadvertently wasted when he separated from Chava. I should say, normally murder is he brought death to the world. But here it says that it's the seed that was inadvertently wasted. Idolatry, because the snake, the simple explanation is because the snake said that Hashem ate from the tree of knowledge, and therefore, and that's how he knew how to create a world. So you should eat from the tree, and you'll also be able to create worlds. That itself is idolatry. Here we look at it explain it on a Kabbalistic level, where Adam caused sparks of holiness to cling to Klipa. And it doesn't say here specifically what was the third major misdeed, not seminal missions. What was third major misdeed? Giloy Arayos, matters, misdeeds of relationship. But it could be that it was a seminal mission. I didn't write that right, guys. I have to rewrite that. Okay, so then in last week, one of the first questions we asked was
Question.
you have a question?
Yes.
Okay. All right, go ahead. I'll take it now.
Say there, the first one is murder, referring to the seed that was inadvertently wasted. But then you say at the end here, it does not specifically say what was seminal emissions. How does that compute?
I missed. I just explained. I didn't write this correctly.
It does say it, Rudy, if you in the book. I don't think in the summary of it it's correct, but in the book it's got it.
We'll see in the book. It might say something, but what I meant to say was not specifically what was.
It doesn't say specifically seminal emissions even in the book.
I wrote it wrong, Rudy.
Okay, but
I'm not hearing.
Okay, it didn't say specifically what was the misdeed of relationships, of Gilei Arayos, of what kind of forbidden relationship that it was involved in. Although that could be obvious that there was the inadvertently wasted seed. It could be, and I think you did say the next thing. I think Jim is right that it's going to say it shortly.
Yeah, it's going to say it.
Okay. And also, Rudy missed last week. We had a whole big thing on this last week, where I gave a lot of background on it. What?
What's the third misdeed?
The illicit sexual relations, which will come up in the generation of the flood.
No,
It's in the book.
You have listed 3 major misdeeds.
Murder, idolatry, and relationships issues. Those are the big. That's the big 3. Okay, big 3 is not Ford, GM, and Chrysler. The big 3 Ritzicha, what's it called? They should see Gili Arayas and Shvichas Dam. Shvichas Damim, Gili Arayas and Avodah Zarah. Idol worship, forbidden relationships, and murder. You know, the big three sins.
It says murder is referring to the seed he wasted.
Yes.
That's one.
Yes.
Idolatry is two.
Yes.
It's like Big Y. Buy one, get one free.
Where's three?
3 is the wasted seeds that become the generation of the flood, who perform all kinds of sexual
The
aberrations.
first thing is the first, but it says murder refers to this.
Ellen, there are three, and everybody, I'm sorry, there are three big things in Judaism that we may not cross the line, even if we're forced to, or even if to save ourselves. We're not allowed to violate these.
We have to die for this.
Yes. Murder, idol worship, and illicit relationship. Those are the big three.
Okay.
All three were included at some level by Adam's sin.
Right.
Is that helpful?
Yes, I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying in your sentence, when you describe it,
The sentence is wrong.
the sentence is when you say murder, which refers to the seed, that makes it theme that that's all one.
No.
You understand?
It's the
That we-
souls
that yes.
as a result of the seed.
Okay. Now I feel better.
Okay. And I'll correct the rest of it later after the class. Rudy, were you saying, do you have a comment or question?
No, not at this point.
Okay, because I'm not, didn't come through very well. Okay, so the souls that left Adam through seminal emission returned as a generation of the flood. Last week, we started off by asking 3 questions. One question was, who was the generation of the flood? Who were they? They were emitted by Adam in a not proper manner. They were nourished by Klippa. They nourished Klippa. They encouraged the breach. They slept and sucked more divine flow into Klippa by themselves engaging in forbidden relationships and other matters of that kind. They were no good nicks. They were bad boys and girls.
Yes.
Okay. The Medrash says that the flood washed away 3 tvachim, hand breadths. Can you all see my fist?
Mhm.
3 tvachim of topsoil that the plow turns over. That's how deep the plow reaches. Earth refers to Malchus. This means that 3 subspheres of Malchus, the intellect, Chachma, Bina, and Das, data. Chachma, Bina, and Das,
Spell check.
to be washed away and replaced. This corresponds to Asiya. Yes. Comments?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
Now, I have a question. Go back to your prior note, 18, I think it is. Yeah. So going back to that, the third misdeed was illicit relationships
Yeah.
that Adam was involved in.
Yeah.
No.
Apparently, I think it says in the book. Well, those are the big three. So when you say that you violate the big three, those are the 3 you're talking about. Most probably it is through the inadvertent emission during the 130 years that he separated from Chava.
So that caused 2 misdeeds then.
Yeah, I said it's like Big Y. You buy one and you get one free. It's a twofer.
The twofer. Okay.
2 consequences of one act.
Okay.
Okay?
Mhm.
Okay. Gershon, are you ready to read?
Where are we? Oh, hold
And
on.
guys, we'll read it.
Hold on.
We'll see if I need to correct this.
All right.
I need to correct the notes.
26, are we?
No, 27
Vern?
Yeah.
Now Adam is.
Okay, I got it. Now, Adam is considered to have committed the sin or in the sin.
In the sin.
Have committed in the sin of the tree of knowledge 3 cardinal sins: idolatry, illicit sexual relations, and murder. Murder, referring to the souls that left him as seminal emissions. The sages compare intentional seminal emission to murder, since the individual is squandering his potential to bring life into the world.
So again, this is in a subtle form. It's not like the emissions are probably also in a very subtle form. Adam was not Yitzchak. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are, when we attribute a misdeed to them, it is on the most subtle levels possible, most extremely subtle level. Here we're talking about Adam. We know that Adam caused destruction by eating from the tree of knowledge, but he was at this time engaged in teshuvah. And we had this last week. We talked about the souls that left him, and about the emissions we talked last week. So
Yeah.
this is one.
And Teshuvah was one way of looking at it. There was
Right.
also a engagement with demons and wasting his seed in that way. There are different ways to look at it. We
That
both
created the demons, yeah.
we talked about
thanks.
both.
Idolatry, for he caused the sparks of holiness to cling to the forces of evil. Giving power to the forces of evil is serving them, which is idolatry. Those souls that left him as seminal emissions returned as the generation of the flood and made things even worse. Hashem sought to wipe out the generation of the flood, for all flesh had corrupted its way on earth, meaning that they engage in all kinds of sexual aberrations.
Aberration, good word. The Hebrew word there, it says all flesh had corrupted its way on earth. The Hebrew word for corrupted is shiches. We usually translate it as destroy. And I do support and believe in what he did is to translate words differently depending on the context. So I do, that is good, that I do approve, if I can say that he used the word corrupted here. But one thing that we do is we compare and see how this word is used in other places. So shiches is used in ordinary destruction, but it is also used to describe the sons of Yehuda, Er and Onan, who Hashem took
That
away at a very young age, because they got married and they did not want for their wife to lose her beauty, to lose her figure, and so they made sure she did not become pregnant. And it says they wasted seed. The word that's used is the same word here, shiches. And here also shiches, just like there it refers specifically to seed that is intentionally avoids getting the wife pregnant. Here too, it means that there are all types of aberrations in the same idea.
Mhm.
Okay, continue.
Therefore, the flood waters were required in order to wipe out all those corrupted bodies. The earth also was washed away to a depth of 3 handbreadths. This refers to the Sephirah of Malchus, which is called the earth. The 3 handbreadths of Malchus, in which intercourse is not to take place, were wiped out. Should I read that? Yes. Malchus, the lower Sephirah, is manifest as the ground or earth, while Zerampin is manifest as the heavens. Just as the heavens rain on the earth, enabling it to grow fruit, Zerampin, the male, fertilizes Nukba, Malchus, the female. The 3 handbreadths are the upper 3 sub-Sephirahs of Malchus, corresponding to Asiya of Malchus. As we stated above, intercourse is not supposed to take place only on the level of mere Asiya. These 3 handbreadths, therefore, had to be restored after the flood.
Okay. So now Noach and his children. So now, I'm sorry. So Adam opened a breach. The sparks, the holiness that escaped, and they were sucked away by Klippa, came back as a generation of the flood, and they continued this, they on a grand scale. And then Noah, then the flood was there to clean up, wash away, and it was up to Noach and his children and his sons to repair and restore the damage. I don't have notes for this, but there's no reason why we can't continue. Okay, Gershon.
Finally, Noah was a manifestation of the Sephirah of Yesod, and his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, correspond to the Chokhmah, Bina, and Das, respectively. They issued by the way of Yesod and were thus rectified because they originated in a high level. The light, therefore, had to be concealed. Noah was said to be a righteous man, perfect in his generation. The appellation righteous, Zadik, is associated specifically with the Sephirah of Yesod and indicates sexual purity. In contrast to the rest of his depraved and degenerate generation, Noah was holy and guarded his sexuality properly. He was therefore able to elicit, oh, that's me. Okay. I got something on my screen. He was therefore able to elicit proper, rectified consciousness, Chokhmah, Bina, Das, or intellect, as opposed to Adam and his sons, each of whom erred in some way regarding proper God consciousness. Holiness has to be guarded and protected from the attacks of evil. Therefore, until the world was purified, Noah and his sons had to be concealed inside the ark. Continue.
Yeah.
When Noah did not possess the mentality required to couple, he was like a corpse and was therefore hidden inside Malchus. That means the ark. Noah personified Yesod of Abba, the organ of procreation. The sages state that there is no erection without Das, referring to the fact that in order for procreation to occur, Yesod must be infused with at least some level of consciousness. Without this presence of consciousness, the organ is flaccid, or, in the terminology of the sages, dead. The word for ark, teva, also means box, alluding to a casket.
Same word.
This was in order that the forces of evil not be able to benefit from him. As long as he was not inspired by the holy consciousness, the danger existed that he could be aroused by unholy consciousness and propagate evil, as happened with Adam. Indeed, he was forbidden to conduct marital relations in the ark, since during the flood there was no coupling above in the spiritual realms, for the upper 3 handbreadths of the earth were dissolved.
Hold on. Okay, it doesn't translate directly. So during the time in the ark, Hashem says that Adam and his 3 sons and his wife and the 3 daughter-in-laws,
Noah. Yeah.
Noah and his 3 sons and his wife and 3 daughters-in-law should enter the ark. And instead of saying Noach and his wife and the sons and their wives, he says first the males, then the females, teaching that relations were forbidden in the ark. Of course, Ham violated that. You knew that was going to come, but it was forbidden, and the rest of them kept that. So it says here that this was because they weren't ready yet to repair the world, and therefore they had to be careful that Klippa should not derive nourishment. Okay, so read a little more. Almost stop.
Marital relations were forbidden in the ark because it was a period of crisis and suffering for the world, and this ambience is not conducive to holy marital relations, which must be conducted in a spirit of optimism and joy. The upper three handbreadths of the earth signify the upper three sephiros of Malchus, the intellect of Malchus. The fact that they were being dissolved indicated a lack of presence of mind in Malchus. Since Malchus also did not have the proper mentality for relations, they did not occur.
So that the earth, the three tvachim of earth had to be dissolved. That means that the intellect, the three levels of intellect, were not ready at that time for proper relations. And so Noach and his sons had to wait, and the wives too. Okay, we'll stop here for next week.
Very good.
Hey guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, John.
Okay, you're welcome.
Good night.
Good seeing you all.
You
Take
good
care.
well.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.